Good morning, everybody. Hope you all are doing well today. Just want to mention that this is our second installment of Theory Thursday. I'm really excited about this one. I do want to mention first and foremost, there was a slight mix-up with our first video, and it kind of went haywire in terms of trying to download it onto YouTube from my particular recording device. So apologies about that. To be looking through chapter 3 of Denton and Woodward. I'm going to cover over a little bit about that today, as well as along with our Theory Thursday with social identity. I also want to mention for next week, I'm going to look over here because I've got my dual screen over here, that you have your Woodward and Denton readings for chapter 4, Woodward and Denton, and then chapter 2 for Cialdini. So make sure you're reading through those. We won't have a discussion board next week. But it is something that I will want you to take a look at, as those will be obviously very important chapters, not only for the exam, but just to kind of keep a basis of as we're progressing along within this particular course. Now, the other thing is that your first assignment for your reflection paper is due next Friday by 11:59 p.m. The Dropbox is not up yet. I will post that on Monday of next week. Feel free to do this at your leisure. So if you want to complete it at some point, today, tomorrow, that's fine. But if you want to wait till the last minute, that's fine too. I would recommend that for one of our exams. But for turning things in, it's your leisure. I haven't gotten any questions about it yet, so I'm not saying that's an alarming thing, but at the same time, if you have questions, please let me know. Again, this is the kind of thing that I'm happy to help in terms of putting this paper together and bringing it in a way that you understand it, that you're happy with, because I am going to go through this, and I am going to really go through it with a fine-tooth comb to, again, separate these definitions that are being provided here. So, again, if you have your book, it'll probably benefit you in that regard, but at the same time, there's a lot of other stuff that needs to be covered in with that definition of manipulation, persuasion, and coercion. So, again, assignments up on As You Learn. Please take a look at it. I have noticed that there have been a few people that have responded on the fixed action patterns discussion board. Again, that's completely at your leisure, but I do request that you get it done by Friday. So by tomorrow at some point, please fill that in and talk about what you've seen. So again, fixed action patterns and understanding how that might deal with your purchasing patterns. So that's kind of the synopsis of what we're going to be getting into next week. So this is my kind of first and last recording of this week. I promise I'll be doing a lot more next week as we've got 2 chapters to work with. And then we're going to get into a theory called Persuasion Knowledge Model, which is pretty cool. And I really enjoyed studying that one from time to time. But I do want to be able to record a little bit more. And like I said, apologies for that first video. So, but like I said, that's all within the Woodward and Denton chapter. Although I will cover a little bit into it because the big thing that we're talking about here for Theory Thursday was semiotics and social identity theory. And semiotics is that nature of signs and symbols, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. The other thing is talking about personal and social identity, and those are taking these symbols in particular and building an identity around them. So, we can come up with 100 examples of where you might identify by a particular symbol, whether it be something like a brand, whether it be a sports team, whether it be, whatever it may be. You may have a certain artist or musician that you really attach to and is part of the fan base and so forth. There's all kinds of things that we could come up with in terms of social identity, but I do want to talk about that as a whole. So first and foremost, looking into symbols and the world of symbolism. Not symbology, for any Boondocks fans out there. So symbolism in there. And you look no further than every word that comes out of your mouth. Our symbols in our alphabet are meant to represent something. So, we can look at the way that phonetics work. And phonetics are taking a couple of those letters and the sounds that they bring. So a f or a s, well, I should say more of a sh. in this case. And, they bring something to the table and they mean something. And as you put those things together, put those words together, they go into these notions of symbols. And symbols in this case are a bit hard to define because there's a lot of arbitrariness too. And so a lot of abstractness, a lot of arbitrariness, a lot of ambiguity that belongs with symbols. And we build those letters in our alphabet to make these words and create meaning. And it's interesting that other languages actually do different variations of this. One of my personal favorites is reading in German. So I speak very, very, very bad German from time to time. But the thing is, I work pretty well in terms of sometimes understanding conversational, but I am really bad at reading German. And the reason is because in many cases, when I've done research and a buddy of mine have done research together, looking through German periodicals, one of the things we noticed is that, he knew obviously, but I didn't, is the aspect of combining words together. And this is something actually Mark Twain made fun of once upon a time in one of his books, is that these words would extend for the entire margin of the page. So from the start of it to the back of it, it was just one particular word that they were trying to use, but it meant exactly what they wanted it to mean. It was almost like using a hyphenated word in that case. So, but within these symbols, we tend to live in two different worlds with it, and it's kind of the worlds that we can observe and the worlds that we have to observe through other lenses. And the worlds that we observe are, the existential. It's anything I see around me in this room. My office is what I can experience. I can experience the lens through my own eyes. It's a very subjective form of research where I would say, in order to understand the world around you, it has to be seen through, again, what you can observe. Whereas the other type in this is the intentional. And so you might want to think of what's called cultivation. In cultivation theory, when Grabner came up with this idea, he basically looked at it in a sense of television was this really cool, unique device, and the more you watched it, and we'll cover over this a little bit, but the more you watched it, the more you started to see other cultures, the way things were done in this particular light, but how accurate are those other cultures, So, I'm sorry, I was running on a train of thought here. So places that I've never been before, I've got this stereotype of what it'd be like. So I grew up a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, and it always was the big thing to don't go to Philadelphia. And unfortunately, if you look at the news with the Minnesota Vikings and Philadelphia Eagles, you may still not want to go to Philadelphia in some cases. But so I went to a conference in Philadelphia. I really wasn't expecting too much, and I didn't really want to go in the sense that I had this inherent fear just because I knew what I've seen and heard from Penguins fans, from media of, out of control Philly fans or something like that. I'm like, my team isn't any better. The area that really was interesting was when I actually went. And so the intentional went to the existential. And so when I visited Philadelphia, I actually had a great time, and I really enjoyed the city quite a lot. There's a lot of cool things to do, cool things to see. I love the art museum, love the market. Again, just a really interesting city to be a part of, real historical. And I love history, and being a Revolutionary War buff like myself, it was a cool experience. So, but again, think of these intentional as the things that you haven't experienced. And I posted a video up online on As You Learn about Good Will Hunting, and it's a great movie, by the way. I love Good Will Hunting. But the notion was in the plot of this film that you were dealing with a genius out of Boston who'd never been outside of Boston, and the whole area was he's extremely intelligent. He could read anything that was put in front of him and just understand it. I wish I had that talent. And with Robin Williams' character, he was trying to understand him because he was a bit of a delinquent. Well, he was a delinquent. And so, there's a whole scene about what you experience and why experience is so important. And the first line of, you know everything about, so he talks about, you know everything about Michelangelo. And he goes, but I'm pretty sure you can't tell me what it's like or how it smells in the Sistine chapter. And I love that line because I think it's so interesting that we would choose that particular sense, smell, to start off with. And again, it's that experience that we haven't understood. So that's where symbolism can be a little bit different, especially since if you may not have experienced in that sense. And you may think of a couple examples in your own life. I can't pretend to be any one of you or live through your college environment because I lived a very different college environment. And so my experiences and my lens, if you will, is going to be very different. And this is some components within what's called phenomenology, which basically states, again, in order to understand the world, I need to ask the people who are the experts in it. Again, who see the things that I can't see, because, again, my lens is only so great. I don't know what it's like to be an online student. And so, you're going to have different experiences than I am, and you're going to face different challenges, triumphs, all that kind of stuff. And it's great. But until I talk to you, I don't know some of these things. So within that, understanding these are a big deal, but we also get into the ideology of signs, symbols, and referent. So signs come into particular, or symbols of particular happenings. So, easy things to think about are the first thing you think of when you think of a sign is a stop sign. It's not naturally occurring, but the communication tells you need to do something. And in essence, it's red, so that's a color coordination for what you need to do. And it just says stop. So now you could run it. Hypothetically, I don't recommend it. I'm not going on YouTube and advocating you do something like that. Watch it. That's going to be the thumbnail when I upload this video. But again, the nature of a stop sign in this particular case means something, that if you do not stop, you could get a wreck or you could get a ticket, one way or the other. But it announces those objects, whereas symbols in this case are are a little bit different in the sense that with symbols they are stimulated sensations and they stand for something other than itself. Okay, and this can be a little confusing because you say stand for something other than itself. What does that even mean? And I've got another video that I posted up on As You Learn, and it's a video by a band I like. It's called Cake, and Cake has a song that's called Short Skirt, Long Jacket, and basically their entire video was, we're just going to go to the beach of California and we're going to give people this song and we're going to say, what do you think about it? And it's the exact same message that's going through, but you'll see all these different interpretations that come from it in terms of understanding it as a symbol. So some people saw it as a business venture. Some people saw it as kind of a narrative, like almost the woman that's being talked about in this song. They would say, I identify with something about it. They, say they don't like something about it. Or they might look at it as, the enjoyment of the song by itself. So the beat, the singer, what have you. There's even a part where they say, I don't like the na 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 na. This is part of the chorus. You'll understand it if you watch it. But again, that's a focal point of what we're talking about in these stimulation sensations here. But due to abstract, ambiguous, and arbitrary words, agreement of a word or a symbol in this case can be very, very difficult. So the referent in this case is the physical object. So being able to take the referent and being able to connect it to the symbol that it's supposed to represent is very difficult sometimes. When I use simple terms, I could use the term like an apple. And am I talking about the computer that I'm using right now, or am I talking about the fruit? And that may be different from person to person. And so that may seem like an elementary example, but the thing that we need to recognize with something like that is that when we have these words, we need to make sure we're communicating clearly, otherwise they don't get to the message across. You can automatically think of arbitrary words like the term dog, for instance. Well, then I'd probably use more ambiguous in this case. If you use the term dog in this case, you might think of a dog that you have, a dog that you had, and had good childhood memories with. You might think about a dog you want. My wife, for example, wants a French bulldog. That's not high on my priority list in terms of the dogs I want. I like my dogs. We've got a German Shepherd and a Chesapeake Bay mix. We love our dogs, don't get us wrong, but it's the dog she wants. And if someone asks, thinking of the term dog, that may be occurring in her brain, whereas the Chesapeake Bay mix would be what would come to my brain in this case. But through all these meanings and symbols and so forth, it's important to recognize what happens when we are introduced to symbols, and especially symbols that we enjoy. Because we're constantly, if we're listening, we're supposed to listen to 2 times as much as we do talk in this case every single day. You spend 66% of your day listening to something. Now, granted, you forget a lot of it, but you do stick to certain things. And certain symbols stand out, and certain symbols tend to really motivate you and excite you and really point in things that you really enjoy. And so with these symbols, we recognize that there's something to them. And as we adapt to those symbols, as we become more interested in those symbols, the thing that can happen is we identify with them. And so this kind of brings us into the essence of what I wanted to talk about in Theory Thursday, which is called social and personal identity. And a good way to look at social and personal identity is basically, first and foremost, what is it and what does it do? Now, with social identity here, we're talking that we're striving for positive identity within a particular group. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Within personal identity, we're referring to the identity that's associated one's sense to self, whereas social identity is related to the groups that a person belongs to. So you may identify in a particular way, and in your group, you may be a part of something, and you're a part of hundreds of groups in any given sense of time. And groups don't necessarily mean, you go to a club or something like that and participate in an activity. A family can be a group. The time I went to graduate school, we consider ourselves a group, a collective, and there's a sense of social identity that belongs with it. There's different expectations that belong with it. Again, me being a big sports fan, the social identity is all over the place when it comes to that collective. You identify personally with that team. When people say, do you like sports? You say, this is my team. That's very personal. But with that, you may say, I also belong to a fan collection. And again, when I lived in Blacksburg, Virginia, I belonged to a very inclusive social identity group with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So this was 2009 when the Penguins won the Cup. And, we hadn't won one in, I think 17 years or something. And it was really strong of us to have that collective identity with each other because we were the ones who always went to the game. So within social identity, and I'm going to back up to that example, within social identity, the higher the self-esteem a group has collectively, the stronger the sense of identity they share. And also the more positive emotions people create towards a group member. It's hard to be a part of something that isn't going well. You tend to stick to things that have success, or at least gives you some illusion of success. And this is why you have what's called bandwagoners, or, in sports, they could be bandwagoners or fair weather fans. When your team is doing really good, people kind of hop on and, ride the wave, if you will. It's kind of a guilty pleasure of mine, but one of my favorite YouTube channels is called Uncle Lou. He's a big Georgia fan, and they were talking about jumping on the Georgia bandwagon because they were really good at college football this year. And he would mention, I don't understand the notion of bandwagoning with Georgia, because he goes, we're not good enough have a bandwagon. In essence, he's saying was they haven't won a national championship since 1980. If I'm wrong on that, sorry about that. I don't know that anybody's going to care on that specific stat. But the thing is, again, when things are going well, this is when more and more people collect to that social identity. But here's the interesting thing about that in terms of there is a little bit of collective information that it goes in opposition of it. So it says higher self-esteem people have collectively the stronger sense of identity. Higher self-esteem doesn't inherently mean that things are going well within the outside. It just means that you stay positive as a group. And I know many friends and family of mine are big into Buffalo sports, Buffalo, New York, so the Bills and the Sabres. So I love the Bills, and they are usually not very good. Or they've gotten somewhere but haven't really done anything with it. And I've got a lot of family, my dissertation chair, my office mate, all these people are from Niagara Falls, Buffalo, New York. In this case, though, it's interesting because with social identity, there's this, in their particular group, there is this collective of you can't appreciate everything we've gone through. So let's say the Bills win the Super Bowl, and I can't believe that this is going to be recorded. Let's say at some point the Bills will win the Super Bowl. For many people, all that time that they have spent rooting for this team gets into a point where it finally pays off. And this is where a lot of people have some cognitive dissonance because they don't see the payoff of suffering so much. And so this is why people are like, forget it, I'm done. I don't want to be a part of this group anymore. And people do. People do this quite a bit. And so that's where, although this particular quote that's mentioned here is correct, the other concept is if it does pay off, that social identity is that much stronger because you went through those hard times. Within my particular group, it was hard to get into our little watch group because we were very selective in the people that we wanted to be in it because we had been watching all season. We would go to local watering establishments or, a friend's house and so forth, and we'd watch, 82 games a season. Well, we didn't watch that many, but, we kept up with it. We probably watched at least half of that at certain places, and then we watched all the playoffs games. So we were very, very, very invested that year in this particular thing. So within social identity, Jones comes up, and this is, granted, we quoted a long time ago, but it is very interesting. It says that there's three main factors in terms of understanding this identity. First is the development and success of the group. Again, if it's not what you're looking at in terms of, let's say you belong as far as a certain political party as a group, if you, quote, win or lose in this case, and a lot of people feel like they either won or lost the last election in this case, you may say, my group is not successful. However, you could say, in terms of how we draw ourselves together may be successful. So, in this case, people who are within the Democratic Party, they may sit this and say that this is a failed election. We did not get what we wanted. In fact, I would, without a doubt, say that would be the case for this particular group. However, the protests that have occurred, the combination of all the thoughts and processes that they saw fit is really interesting. They see a lot of success within their group because they see it as almost as a piece of resistance, if you will. And this is important to understand and be able to consider in terms of a person won't be persuaded just because, Donald Trump had been elected president. So, other people would write signs that say not our president on there. And this is saying I'm not going to conform to what's being placed in front of me. I'm still going to resist. So again, in this case, the bond within the social identity of being a particular, being part of a particular political party is so strong that, if another message comes out, I actually get stronger in this particular area. This gets into a little bit of boomerang effect, but I'm not going to really discuss that too much. So, development and success in the group. Again, people are developing. A lot of people are coming to be a part of it, and how successful it is. There is also a code and ethics of group culture. And this is tough because it's usually agreed upon by the members of the group that this works with the types of rules and regulations that you have to abide by. And, if you look at bylaws for any group that you are a part of, you might see this in terms of, what do you allow? What do you not allow? Again, what is our code of ethics in this case in terms of group culture? For us, it was really just showing up. And if you showed up frequently and you contributed, you were part of the group. We didn't really have too many rules per se, but I belonged to other places where, for instance, a club I hung out with a lot, it was an appreciation for craft beer. And, one of our only rules was we didn't want kids. Just because we use very colorful language at times. And so we just didn't want to, bring that upon somebody else who's trying to be a good parent and doesn't want their children to hear, the quote adult conversation, if you will. And then the last thing, so we talk about, development and success, that's the first thing. Code of ethics, that's the second thing. And moral intensity. So when faced with ethical issues, so a challenge, a dissenter, I've been searching for that word there for a second, comes in and gives a retort to this particular thought process. Do you stand with that moral intensity? Do you change it? Do you kick that person out? Do you leave them in despite? These are all things that you need to think about in terms of making a moral stance in here. And depending on what you believe within the group, that's a little difficult. And this is where what's called strength of identification comes in. And this is a paper from Dalton and Hong, who mentions that not all groups are keen to protect the group image and threatened by negative feedback. They just don't care as much as some other two. So when adverse occurrences happen, the group must rely on the strength of the individual's identification itself. But if they don't, this is where problems can occur. So the bottom line with this is, what does this social identity have to do with persuasion? Well, quite a lot, because when you identify by a particular symbol, you have almost a moral obligation within your group to stay with that thought process, which is difficult because you may have a personal identity that conflicts. So let's say you belong to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, and you have ideologies that go against that. So you may have some ideas that are mostly right, but you don't really see eye to eye. I know several people that would say, I identify as a Republican, but I don't know about Trump as the president. And again, you can see it within them that they're like, I've voted Democrat, voted Republican all this time, but I'm having difficulty standing with this particular area. And again, I'm not trying to step on political views, so who you voted for is who you're voted for. I'm not here to judge, but what I am here to say is when you have these this dissonance going on in your brain of if I'm a certain party member, and I'll give you another example on the other side. When Hillary was elected to be the main Democratic candidate, there were a lot of people who wanted Bernie Sanders and didn't want Hillary on the Democratic side, and they had a choice to make because they didn't necessarily see with all the ideals that Hillary had in this case. And so with this, we need to understand when persuasive messages come our way, how do we react based on ourselves and the group that we belong to? Because sometimes, I like to typically ride the wave a little bit. And, I tend to think a lot of the Aristotelian quote of An educated mind can entertain an idea without accepting it, and I try to live a lot by that. And I hope you do to some regard too, is, understanding that there are different thoughts than your own, and, try to understand where those thoughts may be coming from. And I'm not just talking about politically, I'm talking about anything. And see that other side, see the part of phenomenology where different symbols exist, and do your best. And that can be difficult because, again, you may be ingrained with certain thought processes that are very important to you, and they may make you who you are. And so, again, when you are trying to be sold something, when you are trying to be persuaded to think a different way, understand it in the sense of where you belong in your personal and social identity, and also where their personal and social identity might be when it comes to persuasion. So, again, that may be a little heavy there at the end there, but, just something to think about. And that's going to be it for today. Like I said, on Monday, I will get into some of the other chapters within the book. Again, looking through Woodward and Denton in Chapter 4, Cialdini Chapter 2. And remember, your persuasion paper is going to be due next Friday by midnight. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to answer. I'll be near my email. I'm not going anywhere this weekend. So, again, happy to help out where I can. So, y'all have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you all Monday. All right, bye.